Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of Money with Alpha. This one is going to be a little bit psychology mixed with mindset. I hear so much about money mindset, and I talk a lot about it as well. So, the concept of the beliefs that we have, the stories that we tell, the habits that we have, and there's so much written about a lot of this, but I hear the same repartee over and over, and some of it is really, really, really damaging. And the way we look at things in our life and the anxiety that goes with that, I really wanted to talk about that a bit more. And some of the tools that I use to actually help myself, help my daughter, and help my clients as well, because I see this happening way too much. And as human beings, especially human beings who have heart and want to make an impact and who self-reflect, we tend to be harder on ourselves, I think, than a lot of people who don't do those sorts of things. And that is a blessing and a curse. The fact that we self-reflect and we question and we look at how can we be better, how can we do better, how can we help. All of these things are wonderful things and outcomes that we want to achieve and things we want to do. But if we're not actually looking at things in a way that is helping us to be able to optimize how we help others, then it ends us in this spiral where, things get piled on and we feel overwhelmed and we feel stuck, and we compare and all of this. And it's really, really hard to then actually progress through our life to achieve what it is that we want to achieve. And some of that also comes down to even clarity. One of the biggest hurdles that I see and that I personally experience and as well is, what do we actually want? What do we want to do? How do we want to do it? That clarity becomes a real sort of stopping point. And it's the biggest reason behind procrastination. I work, so as soon as I start to procrastinate, I was like, okay, I'm not clear. What is it that I'm not clear on? How can I get clear and how can I move myself forward? Sometimes procrastination is just you need to chill and just take some time, because I have a tendency to just go and go and go. If you know anything about human design, and you know what this means, you'll get what I'm saying. I'm a generator. And even just by the word generator, we like constantly like generating and generation and all of this. It just, there's energy that goes behind that. And I never really understood it until I looked into human design. And I have a dear friend who's very much an encyclopedia in the space. And I'll be bringing her on to actually pick her brain, and she can share some of her genius on this in the next sort of few weeks. But it's really important to understand how we actually operate and how much downtime we actually genuinely need. Some profiles need more than others, and I found I just like go 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 out, but at the same time I can then be a bit of a steamroller. And I realize, oh my gosh, not everybody has the same level of energy as I do. I need to take a step back. And that plays out sometimes in my need to just do things, and they're not necessarily always the right things. So there's some of the stories that also come up for me when it comes to money. Like, do I need to be doing, and what needs to, do I need to get new shoes for my daughter for like the next thing? And then sometimes like just weigh it down, slow things down. So think about, so we'll talk about stories first, and then we'll look at some of the other things that play out in that space. What sort of stories do you tell yourself when it comes to money? Do you not have enough? Do you constantly hit an income ceiling? Do you have difficulty paying bills each month? Do you have levels of debt that you don't feel comfortable with, but you just think that that's what you need to have in order to have the life that you think you want to have, when you're not even sure about the life that you want? But you see people around you, it might be family members, it might be friends, it might be colleagues, and they're all talking about equity and debt and building and growing and scaling. That might not necessarily be for you, but they're the stories that you tell yourself that are necessary in order to achieve some version of a reality or a truth that you think that you want. And that stuff it's tiring and it's destructive. I spent probably a lot of my 20s in that space. And that's probably when we do that kind of thing. Like, we're testing and measuring, we're still trying to figure out who we are. We spend our teens trying to navigate that separation between us being a child and entering adulthood. And we're so connected to our parents, and then we start to kind of drift a little bit to figure ourselves out, not as an attachment to our parents, but as an individual identity. And that's the messiness of the teen years. And then our 20s, if we've got that separation, and sometimes we still need to figure that part out, then it's a matter of, well, who am I? What do I want? I see what my family expects of me and I see what society kind of expects of me, but does that really fit me? And I know that was a really big sort of self-discovery. And that's when I got into self-development because I was like, okay, I need to figure this out for myself. I don't want somebody to tell me who I am because I've never been good at being told things just because, which is why I've never had a personal trainer. Because I was like, I don't like being told what to do. I don't want to be yelled at. And that's probably not, I get that that's not entirely what a personal trainer does. They're there for encouragement and support and accountability and all of that. But there's a story in my mind that's like, I don't want to be told what to do. I don't want to do something just because it's what everybody does and it's supposed to, there's that. So there's a little bit of that rebellion that kind of kicks in as well. So that I have to watch too, because there's an ego aspect to that. And the ego in and of itself is not a bad thing, but it does cloud our judgment when it comes to self-assessing and looking at what our stories are, because we get quite defensive, and that's the ego really kicking in and going, well, this is just me, this is who I am, and this is the way it's meant to be. And I see these people, we'll get to comparisons in a sec, and that's what they're doing, so I need to be doing the same sort of thing. But you've built that in as part of a story. So question those. And this is not something you have to do on a day-to-day basis, because doing this would just probably blow our minds. It's like the concept of budgeting. It's just, oh my gosh, too much. So, but just every now and then, especially when you notice the languaging and the thoughts that you're having in response to something or someone, just take a moment and go, okay, why am I having this reaction? Or why am I responding this way? Or why am I feeling this way? Something's going on. Sometimes I often find when I have to really speak about something, I start to get phlegmy. And it's not just a dairy thing sometimes, but I was like, oh dear, something's coming up here. And I don't have a defined throat chakra in my chakras in human design either. But if I am around somebody who does, then my voice really comes to life. So knowing that as well as being able to have these tools of asking myself questions and checking in when I'm responding to things and reacting more than responding as well, it starts to make you go, okay, what's going on? And you see patterns then as well. Certain people will trigger you and you have no idea why. And like my dad triggers me, and I mean, there's historic and childhood stuff there as well. But I was like, there's something in him that is also in me that I obviously don't like, that triggers me when I'm around him. But I probably got it too, so I have to take responsibility for that as well. And in a way, when you start to get into that, it lightens the load a bit as well, because you're like, okay, all right, I'm delving into this. I can figure it out. I might not necessarily have the answer for it right now, but I will. And it's that yet. So none of this is a judgment, and none of it is about being hard on yourself and constantly being heavy. It's just an awareness and a desire to improve. And the improvement is iterative. We can take a step forward, and sometimes we can take steps back, and then we can take leaps, and then we can have ahas and inspirations, and then we talk to others and we hear things. Like, I get so inspired by podcasts, which is what I try to do for you as well. And so I absorb a lot of information, which I then kind of curate and serve back as well. So the topic for today has been born out of a conversation as well. And I thought I really want to share this in case others are experiencing it too. So that's the story component. If we look at the beliefs as well that sit behind it, they are very linked, but this is our identity. So if you've read James Clear's Atomic Habits, he explains this, probably the best I've seen anyone explain it. And it's very much about who we think we are. Are we the person we think are we living the life that we think we should or deserve to be living? Quite often not, because this is where there's this tussle. Or are we actually enjoying and loving the life we've got, but for some reason we're feeling like there's something missing? Is it because there's elements that we want to improve, or have we misrepresented our beliefs to ourselves? Is our identity actually tied to something else that someone else has attached to us, and we've taken it on and we're not happy about it because it just doesn't fit? It's like putting on clothes and they're actually not really the right size, but we're wearing them anyway because, well, what else are we going to wear? Rather than kind of stepping out. And this is where I've kind of come in my, like, we think of the 20s as figuring out who we are. The 30s is about building, really. It's about building a family, building a life, it's quite often buying a house if you hadn't already done that in your 20s. And it's all of that sort of thing. And then your 40s, for me, was when I'd be like, oh, wow, here comes the butterfly out of the chrysalis. I'm going to live for more than 2 weeks, obviously. But it's where you sort of feel a bit unshackled. There's a lot of things that you're still trying to figure out and sort out that are done. And you're now trying to either perfect them or embrace and feel grateful for them and acknowledge them rather than taking things for granted. One of the best things, I mean, this is nothing earth shattering, but a gratitude journal and having gratitude for the things that I have. Sometimes I'll sort of get a little bit down. I mean, we all do. Like, oh, this isn't working as well as I thought. Oh, I need to change this again, or I need to create more of this. And it sometimes just feels a bit of a slog. I'm constantly pivoting. I hadn't heard that word until probably about 2 or 3 years ago, and now it just seems everywhere. Everyone's pivoting, and I think the last few years have really made that amplified too. But keeping that gratitude journal, and that really helps you identify your identity as well, because you look at the things that repeat. So I have, we have things like very often when I do a value session, especially with women, they'll always come up with family. Men generally don't, interestingly enough. Not to say they don't value their family, but it's not the first thing that kind of comes up. But for women, it's like, I should have family there, but it's general and it's important and they value it absolutely, but it's not a core value. So it's an interesting element to that, but it's part of who we think we are and the identity that we build around ourselves. So that's that belief system that we have. And then when you apply it specifically to money, that is where we start to go, okay, I can only ever earn this much. It's linked to a story that I've told myself. And then the identity connects to that story. And then it plays out in the behavior. So how I actually then show up in the world and the things that I do, the things I tell others, the things I tell myself, and then what I actually then do about it. Because we all talk. A lot of us talk, a lot of us think, a lot of us wish, a lot of us dream. But to actually do something about it is the behavior. And that is the important part. So again, when I do this gratitude journal, I look at the things and I was like, wow. And interestingly enough, the journal itself, it actually came, I got it at the Mind Body Spirit Festival this year, and they were giving them out for free when you bought a certain amount of books. I love books. I've got, books everywhere around me. But this one also has themes for each month. And the theme for April, I had to really chuckle, was adventure. And it's about, rediscovering your sense of adventure. Meanwhile, I'm writing my gratitude journal, sitting in Noumea in New Caledonia, planning to do other trips, day trips in the school holidays, and then having family come to visit and all the things we were going to do. And then looking at bushwalk. And I'm looking at this going, I don't have a problem with adventure. Maybe some of the other month's topics or themes will be relevant to me, but adventure is not something from how I see adventure, not necessarily, going on weird, or not weird, but difficult treks and doing. There was I had a colleague once who did these. I can't remember what they were called now, but you basically, it was like a 24-hour period, and you just ran through mountains, and you basically didn't sleep. And I thought about that and thought, oh my gosh, adventure racing, I think it was called. And I thought, I realized that that's probably wonderful for the people who love that. That's not my thing. But from what I consider adventure, I'm covered. I'm pretty happy with my sense of adventure. But there's other things that we still need to work on as well. And that's where books like, or diaries like that can come in handy. But being grateful, actually writing it down, helps you recognize it and go, yeah. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have thought of it. I would have been like, sense of adventure. Should I be doing more? And then I look at what I've written and I'm like, I'm pretty all right. Thanks. I'm good. But then in other areas, you'd be like, oh, that's actually probably a good point. There's some gaps here. I haven't touched on this for a while, and I haven't said thank you for this. Maybe I need to go do something else in order to, or just be and reflect about what it is that I really want. So see where I'm going? This is a bit of a deeper episode, this one, but that's where our beliefs match up with our stories, which then lead to our behaviors. What often derails us is comparisonitis. I see this a lot. I should, I would, I could, all would words. It's so destructive. Try and remove them from your vocabulary as much as possible. Should is one of those horrible things. It basically is saying, I know I should do that, but for whatever reason, I'm deprioritizing it. And the deprioritization, if we acknowledge it, it's actually not necessarily a bad thing, or it's heading us in a direction that we actually don't really want to go. We should do it, and there's this duty, this, it's like, I should really go visit this relative, or I should really. And some of it comes from a position of what's human, what's the nice thing to do, and how can I give back. So, but trying to reframe it from a should to a I get to do this. I want to do this. I like to be able to do this. You're not necessarily love, but I like to be able to do this because it makes the other person feel good, makes me feel good. And it's just reframing it, reusing that languaging. That's where should can sometimes tell us the things that we should probably do. But when it comes to comparing ourselves to others, that is where it's super destructive. And social media has amplified this so much. We always had that. I mean, it's always been there. I remember was that the Joneses, comparing yourself to the Joneses? There was even a movie called The Joneses, which I really enjoy watching because it's a good reminder about, but it's a stuff thing. It's oh, that person, they have that, the Joneses, for example, they have the big house, they have the fancy car, they've got another fancy car, and they've got a sports car, they've got a holiday home, they've got a jet ski, they've got like all the thing, and there's the toys, there's stuff. Doesn't necessarily make them better than you. And quite often, what you find underneath it is a whole lot of financial pressure and stress to actually fund all those things. Pretty much going to guarantee, for the most part, that no one will be owning all of those things outright. So, you look at the big house, there'll be a big mortgage to go with it. You look at the fancy cars, there'll be a fancy car set of loans to go with it. Then there'll be the loan for the jet ski, the loan for the boat. There'll be, the loans for the holidays. There'll be so much debt sitting behind that. And I remember sitting down with a client once who was like sweating and almost shaking from the level of debt that they were in. And they were just like, oh, they had more than, I think it was like more than $1.5 million worth of debt. And for them, that was extreme. For some people, they can handle a bit more, potentially depends on your risk profile. But this particular, and they were having a physical reaction to this. And I was going, you've got to figure out what it is that you actually want to keep. What do you want to achieve? And what length of time? Because sometimes we can put ourselves in situations that we're like, okay, this is short-term pain for long-term gain. And I know this, I'm going to be out of this situation in this amount of time because of this and this and this. You have a strategy, you have a plan to support it. That sort of visceral reaction was not healthy. And if that goes on and on for years and years and years, they then feel like they have to maintain the image that goes with that. And then they end up in more debt. And then they've got to go and get more jobs or, try and really work harder. And then they basically have no time to enjoy the toys because they have to work so hard in order to earn the money to pay for the toys that they can't enjoy because they don't have the time to because they're always working. So comparing yourself to that is so destructive because what lifestyle do they potentially have? Do you want? Do you want that? Do you really want that? Because at the end of the day, you can't take any of that stuff with you. You can't even really pass it on. As my ex, tax accountant hat goes, a lot of the things in that scenario are depreciable assets. Cars, boats, jet skis, none of those things are going to grow in value. They're not going to earn you any income. Financially, they're literally just toys and they're expensive grown-up toys. And maybe that's okay. If you have the money to be able to have them, fantastic. My husband funded his boat with a redundancy payment. So he didn't have any debt on it, but he still has the toy. It still costs a bit to have and maintain because that's the other aspect of expensive toys is they're usually expensive to maintain. So you have to factor that in as well. But there's all this stuff that's hidden. It's like an iceberg. We see the pretty iceberg that we want to take photos of, and then the whale does the tail flippy thing, and we have this perfect photo. What we don't see is that we're about to hit, or they are about to hit the iceberg underneath, the huge mass of debt masking as an iceberg that's underneath the surface. Not something that we definitely want to aspire to because that's not relaxing. It's not fun. We don't get to enjoy our life. So just be aware of what it is that you're aspiring to and why you're aspiring to it. And don't compare yourself to others. Even just the other day, I was going through some old photos on my phone to make some more space because of all these adventures I go on. I take so many photos. And I found some more photos when my daughter was a baby. And she always loves seeing those. So I showed her some photos when she was about a month old. And in one of the photos, she's there. She just started opening her eyes and kind of having some facial expressions, probably, more wind related. But anyway, they were facial. They weren't just like closed eyes and nothing. And in one of them, she had this kind of like look on her face. And the next one, she was like, and it was so funny because I said to her, I said, that first photo was 1 second before the screaming photo. If I had only ever posted a photo of the, the cute baby, people would have thought, oh, isn't she lovely? She's always so happy. And I was like, no, no, no. Like literally 1 second later, the screen and that screaming lasted a heck of a lot longer than the happy, content baby photo. So we don't know what's going on behind the photos we see on social media. And even the stories that people tell us when we're catching up with them, it may not actually be what's really going on because they feel shame about sharing what's really happening. When I look at property prices at the moment, I feel like there's a fear that I mean, thankfully we got into the property market before all this sort of took off, but I really feel for the next generation. So part of what I want to do is be able to help my daughter to eventually have property and figure out how to do that. So I'm trying to create a nest egg for her to help support that, not in a way that she feels like she's entitled and has to sit back, but in a way that, will just help like even the playing field just a little bit, to make it a bit closer to what her father and I experienced when we came in. So it's stuff like that. When you look at when people are buying homes and I see the prices going on, you think, oh my goodness, what else is going on in their lives for them to be able to afford that? And are they doing it because of are they extending themselves too far because it's what they think they should do? So it's important to investigate all of this. Tap into you, just take a moment. We're all so busy that it's quite hard sometimes to take a moment, step back, and really question ourselves as to what we're doing and why, what's important. Is time with family and friends more important than having, because the bigger the mansions or the cars or whatever, the more expensive they are to maintain as well. Do we want that? I read these stories about, people in their 20s who have like 20 properties in a, property portfolio because they bought a little one and then they built up some equity and they've used that equity to buy the next one. And before you know it, there's 20 properties. I was like, yes, well, I'm pretty sure they're not managing 20 properties, which means they're paying property fees, they're paying rates, they're paying land taxes, they're paying higher stamp duty rates, they're paying interest on loans, they're paying repairs and maintenance on the property, having to advertise when tenants leave, managing difficult potentially tenants. There's all of this stuff that goes with it. The bigger things get, the bigger the problems and the bigger the financial issues that go with it as well. And sometimes that's okay, but do it consciously. Don't just kind of end up there by accident and then go, oh my God. And then we start to have anxiety attacks as well as a result of it. I've made a very conscious decision. I don't like debt. I invest in other ways. I still make money and I still make a decent return on that money as well. Do I get there a little bit slower? Perhaps. But you know what? I'm still going to retire very comfortably and I'm all right with that, doing it that way. I don't want all that hassle. And I'd prefer to be able to spend my time and money going on adventures and enjoying life and having experiences and spending time with my daughter rather than being so distracted all the time. I remember when she was about 2 and, oh no, must have been older than that because she was able to really, must have been about 4. I sort of lose track of time now. And she actually said, Mama, put your phone down. And I remember she said that to me once. I thought, oh my God, my kid is telling me to put my phone down. And I thought, right, I need to readjust my priorities here. I don't want to be distracted. I don't want to miss things and then look back 10 years later and go, where did all that time go? I mean, I'll probably still do that to a certain extent anyway, but I want to be present for all of those moments so that I can pick up on the things that are going on. I can pick up on the vibes, on the energy, and know what's when things are going well and when things are not. So the nonverbal communication becomes easier to assess. So with all of that, there's a lot in all of that is fundamentally look at your beliefs and the identity that you have around money. Question your stories and your responses and reactions and languaging to things and your triggers. Look at the behavior, the things that are actually important to you. Write down the things you're grateful for. If you don't want to write them down, at least say them to yourself every day. Look around you, acknowledge the things that you're grateful for, things that you can't do yet. If you want to do them, figure out a way to do them. And you're just going to be on the journey to get there because we all are. There's always things that we want to do and we want to progress. And stop comparing yourself to others. Connect with people in real life. Social media comparisonitis is destructive and will send you down a mental rabbit hole that is not a good place. So I hope that helps and that makes sense. And if you need to, please reach out, and have a lovely rest of your day.